During a tense board meeting where the CEO was announcing the bankruptcy of a major company, everyone was stunned when a poor homeless girl walked in barefoot holding an envelope. Her heartbreaking revelation froze the CEO, and what he did next changed everyone's lives forever. Just before we begin, your presence means a lot. Say hi and share where you're tuning in from, only if you want to. The mahogany conference table stretched like a battlefield across the 48th floor of Sterling Industries, its polished surface reflecting the grim faces of 12 board members who had gathered for what they all knew would be the company's final meeting. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago's skyline glittered in the late afternoon sun, oblivious to the corporate catastrophe unfolding within the glass tower. Robert Sterling, 58 years old with silver hair and eyes that had lost their spark months ago, stood at the head of the table holding a manila folder that contained the death certificate of his life's work. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing financial documents that told a story of devastating losses, failed investments, and insurmountable debt. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret Chen, the longest-serving board member, closed her eyes as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. David Rodriguez, head of operations, stared at his hands while his wife of 20 years faced losing their home. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were the dreams and livelihoods of 8,000 employees who would wake up tomorrow without jobs. The automotive division collapsed when our largest client terminated their contract, Robert continued, his voice growing hoarse. The real estate venture in Miami turned out to be built on fraudulent environmental reports, and the tech startup we invested $12 million in was revealed to be an elaborate Ponzi scheme. Patricia Williams, the chief financial officer, spoke for the first time in an hour. Robert, what about the pension funds? The employee retirement accounts? Robert's shoulders sagged under the weight of delivering more devastating news. Gone. All of it. The embezzlement we discovered last month wasn't limited to petty cash. Our former accounting director, Michael Torres, had been systematically draining employee accounts for 3 years. The FBI has him in custody. But the money, it's vanished into offshore accounts we can't touch. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and bitter recriminations. 35 years of building something meaningful, of providing for families, of contributing to the community, all destroyed by greed, deception, and a series of catastrophic decisions that had seemed reasonable at the time. How many people will lose their jobs? Asked Helen Matthews, head of human resources, though she already knew the answer would break her heart. All of them. 8,000 employees from janitors to executives. Everyone except essential personnel needed to oversee the liquidation process. Robert set the folder down with finality. We'll provide 2 weeks severance pay, but that's all we can manage. As the board members absorbed this information, each lost in their own thoughts about mortgages, college tuitions, and uncertain futures, none of them noticed the commotion beginning in the lobby 48 floors below. A small figure had approached the security desk, a girl who couldn't have been more than 12 years old, barefoot despite the October chill, wearing clothes that had seen better days months ago. Her dark hair hung in tangled strands around a face that was gaunt from hunger, but alive with desperate determination. "Please," she said to the security guard, Marcus Johnson, holding up a wrinkled envelope with hands that shook from more than just cold. "I need to see Mr. Sterling, Mr. Robert Sterling. It's really, really important." Marcus looked down at this unexpected visitor with a mixture of sympathy and protocol-driven resistance. "Sweetie, Mr. Sterling is in a very important meeting right now. Is there an adult with you? Someone who can help you make an appointment?" "There's no time for appointments," the girl said, her voice carrying a maturity that seemed at odds with her young appearance. "Please, sir, my name is Emma Santos, and I have something that belongs to him. Something he's been looking for." Marcus Johnson had worked security at Sterling Industries for 15 years, and in all that time he'd never encountered a situation quite like this. The girl standing before him, Emma Santos, looked like she'd been living on the streets for weeks, yet she spoke with a clarity and urgency that commanded attention. "Honey, I understand you think this is important," Marcus said gently, "but Mr. Sterling is dealing with some very serious business matters today. Maybe your parents could call his office tomorrow?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "I don't have parents anymore, and tomorrow will be too late. Please, Mr. Johnson," she had read his name tag, "the envelope I'm holding contains information about his daughter, about Sarah Sterling." Marcus felt his blood run cold. Every employee at Sterling Industries knew about Sarah Sterling's disappearance 3 years ago. The 18-year-old had vanished during her freshman year at Northwestern University, and despite extensive police investigations, private detectives, and a massive reward offer, no trace of her had ever been found. "What did you say your name was again?" "Emma Santos. I live at the Mission Street shelter downtown. At least I did until it closed last month." She clutched the envelope tighter. "Mr. Johnson, I know about Sarah Sterling. I know what happened to her." Marcus's training told him to call the police immediately. Claims about the Sterling daughter came in regularly. Desperate people hoping to claim the $50,000 reward, con artists spinning elaborate lies, well-meaning individuals who thought they'd spotted her in distant cities. But something about this girl felt different. "Emma, I need you to understand that Mr. Sterling has been through a lot of heartbreak about his daughter. If this is some kind of joke or misunderstanding—" "It's not," Emma interrupted firmly. "Sarah saved my life. She saved a lot of our lives, and now I need to save hers." 48 floors above them, Robert Sterling was fielding increasingly desperate questions from board members who were trying to understand how their stable, profitable company had collapsed so completely in just 6 months. "The Miami project seemed solid," said Frank Harrison, head of development. "We had environmental clearances, city permits, architectural approvals. How could it all have been fraudulent?" "Professional document forgers," Patricia explained wearily. "They created an entire false paper trail. By the time we discovered the truth, we'd already invested $8 million in a project that couldn't legally be built." Robert walked to the window, staring down at the city where thousands of his employees lived, worked, and trusted him to provide for their families. Some of them had been with the company since the beginning, watching it grow from a small construction firm into a diversified corporation with interests in real estate, technology, and manufacturing. "There's something else," he said quietly, still facing the window. "Something I haven't told you yet." The room tensed. After everything they'd heard, the idea that there could be worse news seemed impossible. 3 months ago, when we first realized how serious our financial problems were, I took out a personal loan against our family estate. I put up everything: the house, the vacation property in Colorado, Sarah's trust fund that was supposed to pay for her education. Margaret Chen's voice was barely a whisper. "Robert, please tell me you didn't—" "I gambled it all on a desperate investment opportunity that promised to save the company. A cryptocurrency venture that claimed to have revolutionary technology." Robert turned back to face the room, his face etched with shame and regret. It was a scam. Sophisticated, convincing, but still a scam. "I lost everything." The implications crashed over the room like a tidal wave. Not only was Sterling Industries bankrupt, but Robert Sterling himself was financially ruined. The man who had built an empire was about to lose his family home, his personal assets, and any hope of funding the continued search for his missing daughter. "The private investigators I hired to look for Sarah," Robert continued, his voice breaking, "I had to let them go last week. I can't afford to pay them anymore. I can't afford to keep searching for my own daughter." Down in the lobby, Marcus Johnson made a decision that would change everything. "Emma, I'm going to take you upstairs, but I need you to promise me something. If this information isn't real, if you're mistaken about what you know, I need you to tell me right now." Emma looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. "Mr. Johnson, I've been living on the streets for a month. I haven't had a real meal in 4 days. I walked 12 miles barefoot to get here because I spent my last $2 on the bus fare that got me downtown. Do you really think I'd do all that for a lie?" Marcus studied her face and saw something that convinced him, not desperation or deception, but the kind of quiet determination that comes from knowing a terrible truth that must be shared. "All right, Emma, let's go see Mr. Sterling." As they walked toward the elevator, neither of them could have imagined that in the conference room above, Robert Sterling was at that very moment making a phone call that would seal his family's fate. "Yes, I understand the terms," he was saying into his cell phone, turned away from the board members who were watching with growing alarm. "You'll take the house, the Colorado property, and all remaining assets. The foreclosure can proceed immediately." Emma Santos was carrying information that could save everything, but she was arriving at the exact moment when Robert Sterling was losing the last thing he had left to lose. The elevator ride to the 48th floor seemed to take forever, each passing floor marking another step toward a confrontation that would either provide answers or deliver another devastating blow to a man who had already endured more than any father should. Marcus glanced down at Emma, noticing details he'd missed in the lobby, the way she favored her left foot as if stepping on something painful, the careful way she held the envelope to protect it from her own trembling hands, the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. "Emma," Marcus said gently as they passed the 20th floor, "can you tell me what's in that envelope, just so I can prepare Mr. Sterling?" Emma looked up at him with a gravity that seemed impossibly mature. "It's a letter from Sarah. She wrote it before she died, and there's something else, something that proves what really happened to her and why." Marcus felt his heart sink. Another claim that Sarah Sterling was dead, another person claiming to have definitive proof. He'd seen dozens of these over the years, each one breaking Robert Sterling's heart a little more. "Emma, sweetheart, Mr. Sterling has heard a lot of stories about his daughter over the past 3 years. Some people think she ran away, some think she was kidnapped, some think—" "She didn't run away," Emma said firmly, "and she wasn't kidnapped. She was murdered, but not by who everyone thinks." The elevator dinged softly as they reached the 48th floor, its doors opening to reveal the elegant reception area outside the executive conference room. Through the glass walls, they could see the board meeting in progress. 12 well-dressed people surrounding a table while Robert Sterling stood at the window with his phone pressed to his ear. "Mr. Johnson," said Janet Rodriguez, Robert's longtime executive assistant, looking up from her desk with surprise. "What's going on? Who is this young lady?" "Janet, this is Emma Santos. She says she has information about Sarah Sterling. Important information." Janet's expression immediately shifted from curiosity to protective concern. Over the years, she'd fielded hundreds of calls from people claiming to know something about Sarah's disappearance, and she'd watched each false lead take another piece out of Robert Sterling's soul. "Honey," Janet said to Emma, "Mr. Sterling is in a very difficult meeting right now. He's dealing with some serious business problems, and—" "I know about the bankruptcy," Emma interrupted, surprising both adults. "I know the company is closing and that thousands of people are going to lose their jobs. That's part of why I'm here." "How could you possibly know about—" Janet began, but Emma was already moving toward the conference room door. "Because Sarah knew it was going to happen. She figured it out before anyone else did, and she died trying to stop it." Inside the conference room, Robert Sterling was just ending his phone call with his bankruptcy attorney. As he turned back to face the board members, his expression was that of a man who had finally reached the bottom of a very deep well. "That's it," he announced to the room. "Everything's gone. The bank will repossess our family home tomorrow morning. I have nowhere to live and no money to continue searching for my daughter." "Robert," Patricia Williams said softly, "maybe it's time to consider that Sarah might not want to be found. Maybe she saw what was happening to the company and decided to make a fresh start somewhere else." "My daughter didn't run away," Robert replied, with the weary conviction of someone who'd had this conversation countless times. "Sarah loved this company. She was studying business administration because she wanted to work here after graduation. She had plans, goals, dreams about expanding into renewable energy. She wouldn't have just disappeared." It was at that moment, when Robert Sterling was defending his missing daughter's character to people who'd known her since childhood, that the conference room door opened without warning. Marcus Johnson stepped inside, followed by a barefoot 12-year-old girl holding an envelope like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus said, his voice apologetic but determined, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but this young lady says she has information about your daughter." The entire room fell silent. 12 board members turned to stare at this unexpected visitor, taking in her disheveled appearance, her bare feet, her obvious poverty. Robert Sterling looked from Marcus to Emma to the envelope in her hands, his face cycling through confusion, hope, and the kind of protective skepticism that comes from having your heart broken too many times. "What's your name?" Robert asked quietly. "Emma Santos. I lived at the Mission Street shelter until it closed last month. I've been on the streets since then trying to find you. And you claim to know something about my daughter Sarah." Emma nodded, extending the envelope toward him with hands that shook from exhaustion and emotion. "Mr. Sterling, your daughter saved my life and the lives of 6 other girls. She died protecting us, and the person who killed her is still out there, still hurting people." Robert Sterling reached for the envelope with the same careful reverence someone might use to handle a religious artifact. As his fingers touched the paper, he noticed that his name was written on the front in handwriting he recognized, the same careful script that had addressed Father's Day cards and birthday letters for 18 years. "This is Sarah's handwriting," he whispered, his voice barely audible to the people around the table. "She wrote it the night before she died," Emma said. "She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would find you and give it to you. It took me 3 years, but I kept my promise." As Robert Sterling opened the envelope with trembling fingers, none of them could have imagined that the letter inside would not only reveal the truth about Sarah's disappearance, but also expose the real reason why Sterling Industries was facing bankruptcy and identify the person responsible for both tragedies. Robert Sterling's hands shook as he unfolded the letter, Sarah's familiar handwriting blurring through the tears that immediately filled his eyes. The conference room had become a tomb of silence. 12 board members watching their broken CEO receive what might be the final communication from his beloved daughter. The letter was dated 3 years and 2 weeks ago, just 4 days before Sarah Sterling's disappearance from Northwestern University. "Dad," the letter began, and Robert had to stop reading for a moment to collect himself. "If you're reading this, then something terrible has happened to me, and Emma Santos has kept her promise to find you. I'm writing this because I've discovered something that's going to destroy our company and hurt thousands of innocent people, and I'm afraid the person responsible will try to stop me from exposing the truth." Robert looked up at Emma, who stood perfectly still despite her obvious exhaustion and hunger. "Emma, how long have you been carrying this letter?" 3 years, Mr. Sterling. Sarah made me hide it in a special place and promised to bring it to you if she didn't come back to the shelter within a week." "The shelter?" Sarah volunteered at Mission Street every weekend for 2 years, Emma explained, her voice growing stronger as she shared these memories. She taught us to read, helped us with homework, brought us clothes and food. She said college girls had a responsibility to help younger kids who didn't have the same opportunities. Robert felt his heart breaking all over again. Sarah had never mentioned volunteering at a homeless shelter, but it sounded exactly like something she would do. Generous, compassionate, and determined to make a difference in the world. He returned to the letter, reading aloud so the board members could hear Sarah's final words. I've been investigating some irregularities in our company's financial records as part of a business ethics project for my accounting class. Dad, I think someone has been embezzling money from Sterling Industries for years, but they've been very clever about hiding it. The amounts were small at first, but they've grown much larger recently. Patricia Williams leaned forward, her face pale. Sarah was investigating our financial records. She had access through my home office, Robert said quietly. I gave her permission to use our quarterly reports for her college projects. I thought it would help her learn about business operations. He continued reading. The person doing this has been creating fake vendor accounts, inflating construction costs, and manipulating the pension fund investments. Dad, by my calculations, they've stolen over $20 million from the company and the employee retirement accounts. I have copies of all the evidence hidden in a safety deposit box downtown. The board members exchanged stunned glances. $20 million in theft, hidden so expertly that their own accounting department hadn't detected it. But Robert's attention was focused on the next paragraph, which made his blood run cold. I think they know I've been investigating. Someone broke into my dorm room last week, but nothing valuable was taken, just my laptop and some papers. I'm scared, Dad. I'm going to confront them tomorrow night at the shelter in front of witnesses so they can't hurt me. If something happens to me, please know that I love you and I was trying to protect our company family. Robert looked up from the letter, his face white with understanding and rage. Sarah didn't disappear randomly. Someone killed her to prevent her from exposing their crimes. Who was she going to confront? Asked David Rodriguez urgently. Does the letter say? Robert's eyes scanned the final paragraph, and when he read the name written there, his entire world tilted on its axis. Patricia Williams, he read aloud, his voice hollow with shock. The person stealing from Sterling Industries is our chief financial officer, Patricia Williams. She's been systematically destroying our company while pretending to help save it. Every eye in the room turned to Patricia, who had gone completely still in her chair. For a moment, she looked like she might deny everything, but then something in her expression shifted, a mask falling away to reveal something cold and calculating underneath. That interfering little bitch, Patricia said quietly, her voice completely different from the concerned colleague she'd been pretending to be moments earlier. I knew she'd figured it out. I just hoped she'd died quietly in whatever hole I threw her into. The room erupted in chaos. Board members shouted in shock and outrage. Chairs scraped against the floor as people stood up, and Marcus immediately stepped forward to position himself between Patricia and the door. But Robert Sterling's attention was fixed on Emma Santos, who had gone pale and was swaying on her feet. Emma, are you all right? She's here, Emma whispered, staring at Patricia with terror in her eyes. She's the woman who hurt Sarah. She's the one who killed her. Patricia laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth or humanity. Oh, this is rich. The little street rat survived after all. I thought the overdose would have killed you months ago. What overdose? Robert demanded, moving protectively toward Emma. Sarah was getting too close to the truth, Patricia explained with chilling casualness. So I arranged a meeting at the shelter, claiming I wanted to make an anonymous donation. When she showed up, I injected her with enough heroin to kill a horse, made it look like she'd started using drugs, and overdosed. Emma's voice was barely audible. But Sarah didn't die right away. She lived long enough to tell us what happened, to make us promise to hide and never trust anyone until we could find you. And where exactly did you hide? Patricia asked with genuine curiosity. I looked for you little witnesses for months. The tunnel system under the old subway station, Emma replied, her voice growing stronger despite her obvious fear. Sarah taught us how to survive down there. We lived like that for 3 years, taking care of each other, until the other girls finally found foster families. Robert Sterling felt something inside him ignite, a rage so pure and focused that it burned away years of grief and replaced it with crystal-clear purpose. Marcus, he said quietly, call the police. Call the FBI. Call everyone. Already on it, Mr. Sterling, Marcus replied, holding up his phone. Patricia Williams looked around the room at the faces staring at her with disgust and horror, and for the first time in 3 years she realized that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. You can't prove any of this, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Emma Santos reached into her pocket and pulled out a small key. Sarah gave me this before she died. She said it opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank downtown, box number 447. All the evidence is inside. As sirens began wailing in the distance, Robert Sterling knelt down and pulled Emma into a fierce hug. This brave girl, who had kept his daughter's secret for 3 years while living in unimaginable conditions. Emma, he whispered, you just saved everything. 20 minutes later, the Sterling Industries conference room had been transformed into a crime scene, with FBI agents interviewing board members while Patricia Williams sat in handcuffs. Her mask of respectability finally stripped away. Robert Sterling sat beside Emma Santos in the reception area, watching paramedics examine the brave girl who had walked 12 miles barefoot to deliver the truth that would change everything. Her feet are badly infected, the paramedic Angela Davis explained to Robert. She's severely malnourished, dehydrated, and showing signs of long-term exposure to harsh conditions. This child needs immediate medical attention and probably weeks of recovery. Whatever she needs, Robert said firmly. The best doctors, the best hospital, whatever it takes. Emma looked up at him with eyes that held far too much wisdom for someone so young. Mr. Sterling, I don't have insurance. I can't pay for doctors. Emma, you just saved my company and 8,000 jobs. You brought me the truth about my daughter and helped catch her killer. Money is the last thing you need to worry about. FBI agent Michael Chen approached them with a manila folder. Mr. Sterling, we've secured the safety deposit box Emma mentioned. Your daughter was incredibly thorough. She documented everything. Bank statements, forged vendor records, falsified pension fund reports. Patricia Williams has been systematically looting your company for 5 years. How much did she steal? Preliminary estimates suggest over $30 million, not $20 million, as Sarah calculated. Williams was accelerating her theft in recent months, probably planning to disappear soon. Agent Chen sat down across from them. Sir, with this evidence, we can freeze her assets, recover most of the stolen funds, and potentially save Sterling Industries from bankruptcy. Robert felt a surge of hope, so powerful it made him dizzy. You mean the company might survive? More than survive. According to your daughter's analysis, Sterling Industries was actually profitable before Williams's embezzlement. Remove her theft from the equation. And your company has been making solid returns for years. Emma suddenly gripped Robert's arm. Mr. Sterling, there's something else. Sarah didn't just figure out about the money. She discovered that Ms. Williams was planning something worse. What do you mean? Sarah found emails on Ms. Williams's computer about selling the company's client list to competitors and about sabotaging the Miami project on purpose. She wasn't just stealing money. She was trying to destroy Sterling Industries completely. Agent Chen made a note. Do you know why? Sarah thought Ms. Williams was working for someone else. Another company that wanted to buy Sterling Industries cheap after it went bankrupt. The implications hit Robert like a physical blow. Patricia Williams hadn't just been embezzling. She'd been conducting corporate espionage, systematically destroying his company from within while feeding information to competitors. Agent Chen, Robert said, his voice filled with new determination. I want Patricia Williams charged with murder, embezzlement, corporate espionage, and anything else you can think of. And I want to know who she was working for. We're already on it, sir. This case just became a federal investigation. As the FBI agents continued their work, Robert turned his attention back to Emma, who was being carefully examined by the paramedics. Despite everything she'd endured, she had fulfilled a promise made to a dying girl 3 years ago. Emma, I need to ask you something important. You said you lived in the tunnels with other girls from the shelter. Are they safe now? Most of them found families or got into foster care over the past year. I was the last one, and I stayed because I knew I had to find you. Sarah made me promise. What about your own family? Your parents? Emma's expression grew sad. My mom died when I was 8. I never knew my dad. The shelter was the closest thing to family I had. Until Sarah started coming there. Robert felt his heart break for this remarkable child who had sacrificed everything to honor a promise to his daughter. Emma, would you like to have a real family again? What do you mean? I mean, would you like to come live with me? I have a big house that's going to feel very empty once I get it back from the bank, and I think Sarah would want me to take care of the girl who kept her promise. Emma's eyes filled with tears, the first tears she'd allowed herself to shed in front of strangers. You want to adopt me? If you'll have me, I lost a daughter. And you've been alone for too long. Maybe we can help each other heal. Before Emma could answer, Janet Rodriguez approached them with a phone in her hand, her face bright with excitement. Mr. Sterling, I have the bank on the line. They want to discuss halting the foreclosure proceedings immediately. Apparently, the FBI has already contacted them about freezing Patricia Williams's assets and beginning recovery of the stolen funds. Robert took the phone, and as he spoke with bank officials about saving his family home, Emma watched him with amazement. This morning, she'd been a homeless girl with infected feet and an empty stomach. Carrying a 3-year-old letter she'd never been sure anyone would believe. Now, she was sitting in a corporate office, being offered a family by a man whose life she'd just saved, watching justice finally catch up with the woman who had murdered the only person who'd ever truly cared about her. Sarah, she whispered to herself. Touching the empty envelope that had contained her friend's final letter, I kept my promise. I found him, and he believes us. As if he could hear her thoughts, Robert finished his phone call and turned back to her with a smile. The first genuine smile she'd seen him give since she'd walked into his building. Emma Santos, he said formally, would you do me the honor of becoming Emma Sterling? Yes, she said simply. I would like that very much. Outside the conference room windows, the Chicago skyline glittered in the setting sun. No longer indifferent to the human drama unfolding in the glass tower. 8,000 employees would keep their jobs. Countless families would avoid financial ruin, and a homeless girl who had survived 3 years in underground tunnels was about to discover what it felt like to have a father who would never let her go hungry again. But most importantly, Sarah Sterling's sacrifice had finally been vindicated. Her killer would face justice, and her memory would be honored by the family her courage had created. 6 months later, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and photographers as Patricia Williams was led away in handcuffs, convicted on 17 federal charges including murder, embezzlement, corporate espionage, and conspiracy. The trial had been a media sensation, exposing not only her crimes against Sterling Industries, but also a complex network of corporate sabotage involving 3 competing construction companies. Robert Sterling stood on those same steps with 16-year-old Emma Sterling. Her adoption had been finalized 3 months earlier, watching justice finally being served for his daughter, Sarah. Emma had testified powerfully during the trial, her courage in the witness stand helping to secure convictions against 5 other conspirators who had been involved in the plot to destroy Sterling Industries. "How does it feel to finally see Patricia Williams behind bars?" asked Channel 7 reporter Jessica Martinez, thrusting a microphone toward Robert. "It feels like Sarah can finally rest in peace," Robert replied, his arm around Emma's shoulders. "My daughter died trying to protect 8,000 families from financial ruin. Thanks to Emma's courage in bringing me Sarah's letter, those families are safe. And Sarah's killer will spend the rest of her life in prison. Mr. Sterling, Sterling Industries has not only recovered, but has become more profitable than ever. What's next for the company?" Robert smiled, glancing down at Emma, who had grown 3 inches and gained 20 pounds since coming to live with him. Her feet had healed completely. Her dark hair now shone with health, and she carried herself with the confidence of a young woman who knew she was loved and valued. "We're establishing the Sarah Sterling Foundation for Homeless Youth," Robert announced. "Emma has convinced me that there are thousands of children living on the streets who have incredible potential if someone just gives them a chance. The foundation will provide housing, education, and job training for young people aging out of foster care or living without family support. And I'm going to run it someday," Emma added, her voice clear and strong. "When I finish college, Sarah taught me that when you survive something terrible, you have a responsibility to help other people survive too." As the reporters dispersed and the crowd began to thin, Robert and Emma walked toward their car, a modest sedan that had replaced Robert's former luxury vehicles. Despite having his wealth restored, Robert had chosen to live more simply, investing most of the recovered funds into the company and the new foundation. "Dad," Emma said as they drove through downtown Chicago, passing the building where Sterling Industries occupied 12 floors instead of the original 8. "Do you think Sarah would be proud of how everything turned out?" Robert considered the question carefully. Sarah Sterling would have been 21 years old now, probably graduating from Northwestern with dreams of expanding the family business into renewable energy. Instead, she was buried in Graceland Cemetery under a headstone that read, "Beloved daughter and protector of the innocent." "I think Sarah would be amazed by what you've accomplished," Robert said finally. "You honored her memory in ways I never could have imagined. You brought down her killer, saved the company she loved, and you're going to help thousands of kids who are facing the same challenges you faced." "We're going to help them together," Emma corrected. "Sarah didn't just save my life, she brought us together. I think that was part of her plan all along." They pulled into the driveway of their home, a comfortable 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood where Emma attended high school and had made close friends for the first time in her life. The foreclosure had been reversed, but Robert had chosen to sell his former mansion and buy something more appropriate for a father raising a teenage daughter. As they walked inside, Emma paused in the living room, looking at the framed photograph that held the place of honor on the mantelpiece. It showed Sarah Sterling at age 17, surrounded by a group of children at the Mission Street shelter, her arm around a much younger Emma Santos. "I miss her every day," Emma said softly. "So do I. But Emma, I need you to know something. Sarah brought you into my life, but you saved me just as much as I saved you. I was a broken man who had lost everything that mattered to him. You gave me a reason to rebuild, a purpose beyond just making money." Emma turned away from the photograph and hugged her father. The words still felt wonderful every time she thought it. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything. When I graduate from high school, can we visit Sarah's grave together? I want to tell her about the foundation, about college, about everything that's happened since I kept my promise. We can visit her any time you want, and Emma, I think she already knows. I think she's been watching over both of us this whole time." As evening settled over Chicago, father and daughter sat down to dinner at the kitchen table where they'd shared hundreds of meals over the past 6 months. They talked about Emma's upcoming AP exams, about the foundation's first shelter opening in September, about the scholarship program that would help other homeless teenagers attend college. Outside their window, the city sparkled with lights from thousands of homes where families were gathered around their own dinner tables. Many of them Sterling Industries employees who still had jobs because a homeless girl had walked 12 miles barefoot to deliver the truth. It wasn't the family Robert Sterling had planned to have, and it wasn't the life Emma Santos had ever dared to dream of. But it was built on love, sacrifice, and the unshakable belief that sometimes the most broken people can save each other in ways that heal far more than just themselves. Sarah Sterling's murder had been meant to silence the truth. Instead, it had created a legacy of hope that would help thousands of young people for generations to come. And in the quiet moments before sleep, both Robert and Emma could swear they felt Sarah's presence with them, proud of the family her courage had created and the foundation her sacrifice had made possible. 5 years after Patricia Williams's conviction, 21-year-old Emma Sterling stood at the podium of Northwestern University's graduation ceremony, delivering the valedictorian speech to a crowd of proud families. Her adoption father, Robert Sterling, sat in the front row with tears streaming down his face as he watched the homeless girl he'd taken in become a confident young woman ready to change the world. "When I was 12 years old, I was living in underground tunnels, surviving on scraps and carrying a letter from a murdered girl who had saved my life," Emma began, her voice carrying clearly across the packed auditorium. That girl was Sarah Sterling, and her courage didn't just expose a killer. It taught me that education is the most powerful weapon against injustice. The audience was captivated by her story, many hearing for the first time about the homeless teenager who had brought down a corporate conspiracy and saved thousands of jobs. Today, I'm graduating summa cum laude with degrees in criminal justice and business administration, but my real education came from Sarah Sterling, who showed me that protecting others is the highest calling any of us can have. After the ceremony, Robert embraced his daughter, a word that still filled his heart with joy every time he thought it. "Sarah would be so proud of you, Emma. You've exceeded every dream she could have had. The real work starts now, Dad." The Sarah Sterling Foundation has helped over 3,000 homeless youth in the past 5 years, but there are still so many kids out there living the way I used to live. Emma had spent her college years working part-time at the foundation, using her own experiences to design programs that actually worked for street kids. Under her guidance, the foundation had achieved an 89% success rate in transitioning homeless youth into stable housing and education. "I got accepted to Harvard Law School," Emma announced, pulling out the acceptance letter she'd been hiding. "I want to become a prosecutor specializing in crimes against children. I want to make sure people like Patricia Williams never hurt kids again." Robert felt his heart swell with pride. "Harvard Law? Emma, that's incredible." "I also got accepted to the FBI Academy. I'm having trouble deciding which path will let me help more people." As they walked across campus, past the dormitory where Sarah Sterling had lived before her murder, Emma made a decision that would define the rest of her life. "Dad, I know what I want to do. I want to become an FBI agent first, then go to law school. I want to investigate crimes and prosecute criminals. Sarah died because no one was protecting her. I want to be the person who protects other people's daughters. That evening, at the celebration dinner Robert had organized, Emma stood up to make a toast to the gathered friends, foundation staff, and board members who had become their extended family. To Sarah Sterling, who taught me that love means protecting others even when it costs you everything. And to my dad, who taught me that families aren't just about blood, they're about people who choose to love each other. 3 years later, FBI Special Agent Emma Sterling stood outside a rundown warehouse in Detroit, leading a task force that was about to rescue 15 children from a human trafficking ring. At 24, she had become the Bureau's youngest specialist in crimes against children, using her unique background to connect with victims in ways other agents couldn't. "Remember," she told the tactical team through her earpiece, "these kids have been traumatized. They're going to be scared of us at first. Let me talk to them." The raid was swift and precise. Within minutes, they had arrested 8 suspects and secured the building. But it was what happened next that reminded Emma why she'd chosen this career. "It's okay," she said softly to a terrified 10-year-old girl huddled in the corner. "My name is Emma. I'm here to take you somewhere safe. I know you don't know me, but I promise you, no one is ever going to hurt you again." The girl looked up with eyes that Emma recognized, the same haunted expression she'd seen in her own mirror years ago. "Are you a police officer?" the girl whispered. "I'm an FBI agent, and when I was your age, I lived on the streets too. I know how scary this is, but there are people who want to help you." As the children were taken to safety, Emma's phone rang. It was Robert, calling from Chicago, where he was overseeing the opening of the Foundation's 10th shelter. "Emma, I just got word from your supervisor. 15 kids rescued, 8 arrests, and the entire trafficking network dismantled. I'm so proud of you." "It never feels like enough, Dad. For every kid we save, there are dozens more out there." That's exactly what Sarah used to say when she volunteered at the shelter. She always wanted to help one more person, save one more life. That night, in her FBI-issued apartment, Emma sat at her desk writing her law school application essays. She'd been accepted to Harvard, Georgetown, and Yale, but she was leaning toward Northwestern, Sarah's school. "I want to prosecute the people who hurt children," she wrote, "because I understand what those children are going through. I've lived in the shadows, survived on scraps, and felt the terror of being completely alone in the world. But I also learned that one person's courage can change everything." She paused, thinking about Sarah Sterling's letter that had saved so many lives. "My sister, Sarah Sterling, died protecting vulnerable children. I want to live protecting them. Law school will give me the tools to ensure that predators, like the ones I investigate, face the full consequences of their crimes." As she sealed the application, Emma felt Sarah's presence with her, a feeling she'd experienced countless times over the years when she was helping other people the way Sarah had helped her. 3 months later, Emma received her acceptance letter to Northwestern Law School, along with a full scholarship funded by an anonymous donor. She suspected Robert was behind it, but when she asked, he just smiled mysteriously. 7 years after graduating from Northwestern, 31-year-old Emma Sterling had become one of the most successful federal prosecutors in the country, specializing in child trafficking and exploitation cases. Her conviction rate was 97%, and she'd personally sent over 200 predators to prison. But it was the case that landed on her desk on a cold February morning that would bring her full circle. "Emma," said U.S. Attorney David Kim, "we've got something that might interest you. Remember Vincent Castellano, the crime boss who ran trafficking operations in the Midwest 15 years ago?" Emma looked up from the case files she'd been reviewing. I thought he was killed in prison. He was, but we just arrested his son, Marcus Castellano, for running the same type of operation his father did. And Emma, one of his victims, is a girl who reminds me a lot of you at that age. The case file made Emma's blood run cold. Marcus Castellano had been kidnapping homeless children and selling them to wealthy predators across the country. His current victim was a 12-year-old girl named Sofia Martinez, who had been living on the street since aging out of foster care. I want this case, Emma said immediately. I was hoping you'd say that. Emma, this could be the biggest trafficking bust of your career, but I need to warn you, Castellano has connections everywhere. He's going to fight this with everything he's got. Emma thought about 12-year-old Sofia Martinez, alone and terrified in whatever hole Castellano was keeping her, and felt the same burning determination that had driven her through law school and the FBI academy. He can fight all he wants. I've been preparing for this case my entire life. The trial lasted 6 months and made national headlines. Emma's opening statement moved the jury to tears as she described the systematic abuse of vulnerable children by predators who thought their wealth and connections made them untouchable. Sofia Martinez is 12 years old, Emma told the jury. She has no parents, no family, no one to protect her except us. The defendant kidnapped her from a homeless shelter and sold her to men who saw her not as a human being, but as a commodity. During cross-examination, Castellano's defense attorney tried to discredit Emma by bringing up her own background. Miss Sterling, isn't it true that you were once homeless yourself? That you lived on the streets and might be emotionally compromised in this case? Emma stood up slowly, her voice steady and strong. Yes, I was homeless. I lived in underground tunnels for 3 years. I survived on scraps and slept on concrete floors. And that experience taught me something that no law school could. I learned what it feels like to be completely powerless and alone. She turned to face the jury. But I also learned that one person's courage can save lives. A young woman named Sarah Sterling died protecting children like Sofia Martinez. I prosecute cases like this to honor her memory and to make sure no child suffers the way Sofia has suffered. The jury convicted Marcus Castellano on all 47 charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict, Emma found Sofia Martinez in the witness waiting room, now placed with a loving foster family who had already begun adoption proceedings. Miss Sterling, Sofia said shyly, thank you for believing me. Thank you for being brave enough to testify. You helped put a very bad man in prison, and you probably saved other children from being hurt. As Emma walked out of the courthouse, she called Robert, who was now 68 and had turned day-to-day operations of Sterling Industries over to younger executives while focusing on the foundation. Dad, we won. Castellano got life. I never doubted it for a second. Sarah would be so proud of you, Emma. I hope so. I feel like I'm finally doing what she would have wanted me to do. On the 15th anniversary of Sarah Sterling's death, Emma stood before the largest gathering in the Foundation's history. Over 500 people had come to the dedication ceremony for the new Sarah Sterling Center for Child Advocacy, a state-of-the-art facility that would train prosecutors, social workers, and law enforcement officers in handling crimes against children. 15 years ago, Emma began, addressing the crowd that included governors, senators, and advocates from across the country. A homeless 12-year-old girl walked into a corporate boardroom carrying a letter that would change everything. That girl was me. And I'm standing here today because of the courage of a young woman who died protecting children she'd never met. Robert Sterling, now 73 but still sharp and engaged, watched from the front row as his adopted daughter dedicated her life's work to the memory of his biological daughter. Sarah Sterling was 18 years old when she discovered that her father's company was being systematically destroyed by a criminal conspiracy. She could have walked away, stayed safe, focused on her college studies. Instead, she chose to investigate, to gather evidence, and ultimately to die protecting not just her father's company, but the 8,000 families who depended on it for their livelihoods. Emma paused, looking out at the audience that included dozens of young people who had been helped by the foundation over the years. But Sarah's story didn't end with her death. Her courage created a ripple effect that has touched thousands of lives. The foundation that bears her name has helped over 10,000 homeless youth find stability, education, and hope. The prosecution techniques we've developed here have been used to convict child predators across the country. A young man in the audience stood up. "Miss Sterling, you saved my life when I was 14. I was living on the streets, addicted to drugs, and convinced I was worthless. The foundation gave me a second chance. I just graduated from medical school." Emma smiled, recognizing Dr. Michael Rodriguez, one of the foundation's first success stories. Michael represents everything Sarah Sterling believed in, that every child has infinite potential if someone just gives them a chance. After the ceremony, Emma and Robert walked through the new center, looking at classrooms where future advocates would learn to fight for vulnerable children, laboratories where evidence would be analyzed, and counseling rooms where young victims would begin to heal. "Emma," Robert said as they stood in Sarah's memorial garden, "I need to tell you something I've never said before." "What is it, Dad?" "When you walked into my office 15 years ago, I thought you were bringing me closure about Sarah's death. I thought your letter would help me understand what happened to her so I could find some peace. Didn't it? It did much more than that. It brought me a daughter. It gave my life new meaning. It turned Sarah's death into something purposeful instead of just tragic." Emma felt tears in her eyes. "You saved me, Dad. You took in a scared, homeless kid and gave her a family. We saved each other, and together we've saved thousands of other children. That's Sarah's real legacy, not just that she died protecting people, but that her death created a family dedicated to protecting others." As the sun set over Chicago, Emma made a decision that would shape the next phase of her life. "Dad, I want to run for Congress. I want to write federal laws that protect children, increase funding for programs like ours, and make sure prosecutors have the tools they need to fight trafficking and exploitation." Robert smiled. "Congresswoman Emma Sterling, Sarah would love that." 3 years later, Congresswoman Emma Sterling stood on the floor of the House of Representatives, delivering an impassioned speech in support of the Sarah Sterling Child Protection Act. Groundbreaking legislation that would revolutionize how America handles crimes against children. "Mr. Speaker," Emma said, her voice carrying the weight of personal experience and professional expertise, "this bill isn't just about policy. It's about the fundamental promise we make to our most vulnerable citizens. We promise that they will be protected, that they will be valued, and that they will never be forgotten." The bill, which Emma had spent 2 years crafting with input from prosecutors, child advocates, and survivors, would increase penalties for child trafficking, create new federal funding for victim services, and establish specialized courts for handling crimes against minors. "I stand before you today not just as a member of Congress, but as a survivor," Emma continued. "I was 12 years old when I lived on the streets, sleeping in abandoned buildings and surviving on scraps. I know what it feels like to be invisible, to be prey, to believe that no one cares whether you live or die." The chamber had fallen completely silent, every representative listening intently to Emma's story. But I also know what it feels like to be saved. A young woman named Sarah Sterling died protecting children like me. Her father, Robert Sterling, adopted me and gave me a chance at life. That chance led me to the FBI, to the prosecutor's office, and now to this chamber where I can fight for children on a national level. The Sarah Sterling Child Protection Act passed by a vote of 387 to 48, the largest bipartisan majority Emma had seen in her 3 years in Congress. After the vote, Emma called Robert from her office in the Capitol building. "Dad, we did it. The bill passed." "Sarah would be so proud," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma, you've taken her sacrifice and turned it into something that will protect children for generations. I couldn't have done it without you. You taught me that love means fighting for people who can't fight for themselves." That evening, Emma attended a celebration dinner with other members of Congress, advocacy groups, and survivors who had supported the legislation. But her mind was on a different dinner, the one she'd shared with Robert and Sarah's memory 15 years ago, when she'd first decided to dedicate her life to protecting children. "Congresswoman Sterling," said Senator Patricia Johnson, "what's next for you?" "There's talk about you running for higher office." Emma considered the question. At 34, she was already being mentioned as a potential candidate for senator or even president someday, but her heart was still focused on the work, not the titles. "My next goal is to see this legislation implemented properly. I want to make sure every prosecutor in America has the training and resources they need to fight child trafficking. I want to see conviction rates increase and recidivism rates decrease. And personally, any plans for marriage, children of your own?" Emma smiled, thinking of the dozens of young people she mentored through the foundation, the survivors she worked with in Congress, and the victims she'd helped prosecute criminals. "I have thousands of children already. Every kid we save through this legislation, every survivor who finds healing, every young person who gets a second chance, they're all my family." As she drove home to her apartment near the Capitol, Emma passed the homeless shelter where she volunteered twice a week, teaching literacy classes to children aging out of foster care. Some things never changed. She still felt Sarah's presence strongest when she was working directly with kids who reminded her of herself. "Sarah," she said quietly, as she looked up at the stars barely visible through the city lights, "I hope I'm making you proud. I hope you know that your sacrifice is still saving lives every single day." 25 years after Patricia Williams' conviction, 59-year-old Emma Sterling stood at the podium of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, addressing world leaders about the global crisis of child trafficking and exploitation. As U.S. Secretary of Human Rights, a cabinet position created specifically for her, she had become the international voice for vulnerable children everywhere. 25 years ago, Emma began, her voice carrying to delegates from 193 nations. "I was a homeless child living in underground tunnels, surviving on scraps and believing that the world had forgotten me. Today, I stand before you as proof that every child, no matter how poor, how forgotten, how seemingly worthless society might deem them, has the potential to change the world." In the audience, 88-year-old Robert Sterling sat in the family section, his eyes bright with pride as he watched his adopted daughter address the United Nations about the global child protection initiative she had spent 5 years developing. "The young woman who saved my life was named Sarah Sterling," Emma continued. "She was 18 years old when she died protecting children she had never met. Her courage didn't just expose a killer, it created a movement that has now helped over 100,000 vulnerable children worldwide." The Sarah Sterling Foundation had grown into an international organization with programs in 47 countries. The child protection legislation Emma had championed as a congresswoman had been copied by nations around the world, and the prosecution techniques developed in Chicago were now being taught at law schools and police academies on every continent. "But our work is far from finished," Emma said, her voice growing more passionate. "Tonight, there are children sleeping on the streets of every major city on Earth. There are children being trafficked across borders, sold into slavery, exploited by predators who believe their victims are powerless." She paused, making eye contact with delegates from countries where child protection laws were still weak or non-existent. "Those children are not powerless. They have us. They have this assembly. They have the collective moral authority of every civilized nation on Earth. And I am here today to demand that we use that authority to protect them." Oh, the Global Child Protection Initiative that Emma presented would create the first binding international treaty on child trafficking, establish mandatory reporting requirements for all UN member nations, and provide funding for rescue and rehabilitation programs worldwide. After her speech, as delegates debated the resolution, Emma stepped outside onto the UN plaza where Robert was waiting for her. "Emma," he said, pulling her into a hug, "that was incredible. You just changed the conversation about child protection for the entire world." "It's what Sarah would have wanted," Emma replied. "She died because one person's greed mattered more than children's lives. I've spent 25 years making sure that never happens again." They walked together through the plaza, past the flags of all the member nations, each representing millions of children who might benefit from the protections Emma was fighting to establish. "Dad, I've been thinking about something. You're 88 years old, and we've spent 25 years building this foundation together. What do you want your legacy to be?" Robert smiled, looking at the woman who had started as a homeless girl carrying a letter and had become one of the most powerful advocates for children in the world. "My legacy is sitting right here next to me. You, Emma, you're my legacy. You're Sarah's legacy. You're the proof that love can triumph over tragedy, that courage can outlive the people who demonstrate it. And you're mine. You took in a broken child and showed her that families aren't just about blood. They're about people who choose to love each other." As the sun set over New York Harbor, Emma made one final decision that would complete the circle that had begun 25 years earlier in a Chicago boardroom. "Dad, I want to write a book about our story, about Sarah, about the foundation, about all the children we've helped over the years. I want other people to know that no matter how dark things seem, love always finds a way to create light." Robert nodded, tears in his eyes. "What would you call it?" Emma looked up at the UN building where world leaders were debating legislation that could protect millions of children, then at her father, who had given her the chance to become the person she was meant to be. "I'd call it the letter that changed everything," she said, "because that's what Sarah's letter did. It changed everything. It saved a company, caught a killer, created a family, and launched a movement that's still protecting children 25 years later." As they walked toward their car, Emma felt Sarah's presence one last time. Not as a ghost or a memory, but as a living force that continued to inspire and protect through the work that bore her name. The homeless girl who had carried a letter 12 miles barefoot had become the voice of the voiceless. The murdered teenager who had died protecting strangers had created a legacy that would protect children for generations. And the father who had lost everything had gained a daughter whose love would heal the world, one child at a time.